Former diplomat turned prolific author and a scholar and former member of parliament to boot, Pavan Varma's latest book is a slim but ruminative novel titled The Lady Who Carried the Monk Across the River. It gives a novelistic twist to the famous Buddhist parable about two monks and a woman waiting to cross a muddy river. Set in the Himalayan foothills, the book has been described as a taut, philosophical novel where faith meets longing and desire refuses to stay on the margins. Pavan Varma spoke to Mayank Chhaya Reports. Welcome to Mayank Chhaya Reports, Mr. Verma. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Mayank. It's great talking to you as always.
Congratulations on yet another book. It's a novel, rather a slim one, but sounds rather interesting. It's called The Lady Who Carried the Monk Across the River.
Yes, here is the book,
Yes,
and in the bookshops and also available on Amazon. It was just launched at the Jaipur Literature Festival.
yes, I'm aware. You know, it's remarkable how prolific you've been.
Well, writing is both an anchorage and a solace and a very significant distraction.
Indeed,
So
indeed.
I actually write 10 columns a month in
I'm always
addition to
saying you're all over the place.
in
Yes,
addition to my book. So, but this
yes,
book is different. It's my second novel.
right.
I wrote earlier a novel called When Loss is Gain, uh, which is also a love story of a different sort, which was actually signed up for a Bollywood film. I even got the advance, but the film has not been made. And now, after a hiatus, where several other books have come out, which are
Right.
non-fiction, which you are aware of, Mayank, we have spoken with you. Adi Shankaracharya, the Hinduism's greatest thinker. Then I had the Great Hindu Civilization. Then I had Chanakya's view. Then I had Echoes of Eternity and a journey through Indian thought from the Rig Veda to the present. But after that, now here is the novel. I also
Yeah,
had a book of Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas.
it's extraordinary. I really marvel. I always admire people who are able to produce so proficiently.
Well, thank you very much, but it gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah. You know, going by the excerpts in the novel, it appears to give the famous Zen parable about two young Buddhist monks and a fetching young woman a twist. Tell me a bit more about it.
Well, the idea came to me as a story set in India from the Zen parable, where two monks, one of whom picks up a lady and helps her to cross the river, who is then berated by the other monk who for not being able to resist the temptation. And after a while, the first monk turns and says to his friend that I picked her up and put her down. You are still carrying her. And it's a very valid uh, proposition illustrated well. Actually, I reverse the paradigm and I
Right.
ask as the story unfolds, is it so easily possible to just put someone down? And then that begins the beginning of my story, where on the one hand, we have just like in the Zen parable, here you have a celibate monk
Right.
who's supposed not even to touch physically women as such. And on the other hand, the assumption is that once he put her down, she left his mind or mind space. But if that doesn't happen, what is the dialectic between spirituality and desire? Are they always arraigned as two polarities? Is there a meeting point? Is that meeting point valid? How do you find that balance? And this then is illustrated through a methodology which we could discuss, where on the one hand, there is in the great Indian tradition a shastrarth or debate between our protagonist, the celibate monk who picks up the lady, and his guru.
Right.
And on the other hand, in the backdrop of this limited 5 day discourse, which is very interesting in my view on its own, both for its substance and the manner in which it unfolds, is a love story.
Right.
Each character has a background and a present, and in some ways, a dilemma about the future.
But in the Hindu tradition, desire is sort of one of the parts to spirituality. Uh,
Indeed.
there are people who believe that's you do pass through that. So why would there be a contradiction between being a celibate or renunciate and desire that go along the way?
Well, actually, a renunciate who's celibate is supposed to have, in a way, uh, transcended desire, or at least opted out of its snare, quote unquote. On the other hand, I think one of the things this book illustrates through a very sort of it's a love story and, uh, as I said, a novel. It also, the novel attempts to illustrate that the actual play out of the four highest purushasthas of the Hindu worldview: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Mayank, you can't find a more balanced and pragmatic view of life. In fact,
Absolutely.
I would say it even leaves Confucius asleep on the post. Uh, so, so now, but how does it work in practice? Here is a genuinely committed monk who wishes to transcend desire for the goals that he cherishes, which is peace of mind, lack of agitation, complete involvement with issues of metaphysics and philosophy, a reclusive world which he likes, the quietude, the serenity. And on the other hand, the power of desire, the irrationality of its attraction, even when you have not welcomed. And this happens, and that's why it's called a parable for ordinary people, because this
Right.
happens in lives. And then you have contrasting personalities in this. The other monk, the guru himself, and a very strong lady, the one who was so carried and put across, but she's not some passive bundle. She's Mandakini.
Right.
And therefore, the title, The Lady Who Carried the Monk Across the River, rather than in the Zen parable, where the monk carried the lady across the river and put her down and walked on. Sometimes with women, you just can't do that.
Could it be that for that brief passage when the monk was carrying her, he was living out his desires, and when he puts her down, then he moves on? Is it possible to do that? That's also a form of transcending your desires.
It could have ignited dormant feelings within him, which he was in denial of. Uh, the physical touch, the proximity. We are human beings, and we don't necessarily have to be false to ourselves in order to unwillingly accept, even if unwillingly, that there could be other emotions and urges. And the great uh, dilemma, if I may use the word again, for this monk is that he thought he had gone beyond that, but he seems not to. And in one sense, then he's being untrue to his calling, but on the other hand, unable to forget that experience.
Right. Yeah, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this conflict. Okay, you have given up, you've sublimated, but for that brief passage you felt it, and again you rose above it. Now, isn't that a greater thing to do, that you felt it and you rose above it, rather than completely forget it?
No, true. I think that you have to be honest to yourself. And on the other hand, when you say sublimated it, you have to be again honest and look at yourself in the mirror and ask, have you sublimated?
Hmm.
Desire in the Hindu worldview is a very powerful emotion and an exalted emotion, if not used either in excess or misused.
Right.
So here is the exalted form of desire, which does not involve exploitation, which does not involve misuse of somebody else, but a genuine sense of attraction. But it is happening to a celibate monk.
Right.
And in that sense, he is trying in his own head to reason out what is going on inside it. And that is why the debate.
Indeed.
As you know, I don't want to give out the contents of the book, but the debate is also to clarify his own mind with someone who is absolutely certain about the certitudes of life, which is his
Right.
guru.
Right. But to digress a little bit, I was thinking while reading the excerpts, I was thinking of Gandhi's experiments. They've been written about by himself, in fact, that he was testing himself whether he had managed to rise above that. Now, we don't know whether he did or did not, but there are people who have attempted to do that. Now, my understanding of the traditions that you have written so extensively about is, like I asked earlier, desire is one of the stops along the way to ultimate spirituality, isn't that?
It could be. In fact, desire, and that is why it's not coincidental that we have Chanakya's, Kautilya's Arthashastra,
Hmm.
Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. We have a treatise on the Arthashastra and we have a treatise on the Kama Sutra. And both authors mention that there were several before. In fact, Kautilya mentions that there were at least 9 schools of Indian politics. So obviously, once you have a particular tradition, it also it becomes one where there has been cerebral application of mind. Why? In fact, in the Kama Sutra, as you may be aware, in the first chapter, Vatsyayan, the author is asked by an imaginary interlocutor why this book. And his answer to that is that these are the 4 Purushas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And in each of the first 3, Dharma, Artha, Kama, are pursued in proportion and not exclusion. As
Right.
part of a balanced life, they lead automatically to moksha.
Right. Right.
So, therefore, there is philosophical validity to desire, and it, in fact, in moments uh, of the pinnacle of desire, that vantage point can also be a window to the divine, because after all, desire too is a gift of the gods. I mean, Kama in the Hindu mythology is a god and a very powerful god.
Right.
You have to read Tulsidas in Ramcharitmanas, where it describes when Kama is assigned by the gods to break Shiva's meditation. And his passage to Shiva, how completely his attraction is irresistible. Trees bend towards him, birds are attracted to him, even saints meditating in the caves cannot resist him. And finally, when he wakes up Shiva from his great meditation, in anger he burns him to ashes, but Parvati requests Shiva. When Shiva asks her for a boon, that she says, all I ask is that you revive Kama, because the life is meaningless without it. So
Right.
it's a powerful emotion. Hinduism, in its pragmatism, realizes this and accepts it. Yes, as much is the pursuit without desire or transcending desire of an ascetic or a celibate monk's life. So both are valid, but both are not necessarily
Right.
exclusive to each other. And
True.
when somebody is caught between the choices, there is bound to be a story, a
Indeed.
novel with
Indeed.
ending.
Yeah. Tell me now, when you were writing it, were you consciously or unconsciously siding with any of the arguments that these two men make against each other, or in their favor? What was your? I'm not asking you to reveal anything, but were you conflicted that am I on the Cavalier's side or am I on Brihaspati's side? Or I have no sides?
You see, I'll tell you some of the arguments that Brihaspati makes with the Guru, in that, for me, uh, writing it was a wonderful experience because I
Right.
believe in Shastras as a part of Indian tradition. Adi Shankaracharya and Mandan Mishra had the great debate, Sabya Samvad, civilized discourse. The two people sit down and talk even if they differ, but don't go and break each other's heads. That's our tradition. So here are two people. One is a very obedient and brilliant student. Here is a guru. And they are discussing the validity, right or wrong, the morality of a particular act, and which, of course, involves a whole philosophical and otherwise discourse. Now, much of what Brihaspati says about especially Vedanta and Advaita and the need to transcend desire, I identify.
Hmm.
Much of what Keval agrees to is also what Keval identifies with. But Keval has had an experience with Guru Brihaspati you cannot understand, or at least in the initial stages, Keval cannot rationalize himself.
Right.
Therefore, he needs clarity. Are they necessarily opposed, or can they be subsumed as part of a balanced life where you are spiritually inclined but also porous to the great gift of desire in its exalted sense? When I say exalted, I don't exclude the sensual, but I'm ridding it of any misuse or excess.
Right. Now, between the two, Brihaspati and Keval, who do you think is more delivered in the sense that Brihaspati, let's say for the sake of argument, has never experienced even the touch of a woman because he believes strongly in the vow of celibacy. On the other hand, Keval, having practiced it reasonably well, has a momentary lapse and again he moves on and rises above it. So, in terms of becoming what you're becoming, who's greater in your judgment? Brihaspati or Keval? It's a silly question, perhaps, but I'm curious to know what you think.
Because without revealing the story, because I want readers to read it, to think about it. You'll finish the book fast. It's a
Yeah,
slim novel,
yeah,
but it may lead you to think for much longer.
hmm,
And see, it's not it's not as if somebody can take a vaccination and
hmm,
become immune to desire. It is something that pops up even in the most resolute minds, or the minds most resolutely against. And Guru Brihaspati has to deal with it as well in his own way, and Keval has to rationalize and understand it in his own way without either of them doubting the great solace, even bliss, of the moments of deep spiritual meditation or insight. Now,
right,
that is the way I see it. So I can't say who's better or who's worse because I realize both are human. We have to accept the fact that we are human without devaluing the term to mean that we are base.
right. In your imagination, is the river literal or metaphorical?
Both, both.
Okay,
And when a lady carries a monk across the river, or when the in the Zen parable the lady is carried across the river. Uh, I think in both, but more certainly and specifically in mine, the river is a physical aspect of nature, and also, in a sense, a metaphorical Rubicon.
Right.
You cross the line. Uh, and therefore, for me, it is both. Uh, and it also provides me the right setting to base my story. As you know, the story is set in the foothill of the Himalayas,
Right. Right.
where
Now,
you have rituals of the kind I described.
right. In the literal situation, helping someone who's helpless cross the river is the right thing to do. My question is, in the metaphorical situation, the response would be more layered, don't you think?
I would say that at the moment when Keval helped Mandakini to cross the river
Hmm.
was an act of spontaneous assistance. In the manner in which that experience stayed with him, it connoted crossing the river in terms of a certain decision, either here or across, which he had taken for his own life.
Hmm.
Now, now again, both of you don't, none of us want to reveal
No,
the
no,
story and all
absolutely.
that because there are many contrasts here. Each character has something, as an author's, allow an author's conceit for a moment, although the novel is slim. Uh, each of the characters has a personality of his own, as does the other celibate monk who's a student along with Keval of
Yeah,
Buddhism. He doesn't believe in the hypocrisies of being a celibate monk and only is pursuing it as a matter of convenience or the absence of any other option. Now, that's also a position to take. And he pursues it as honestly as he can, and he has a different set of experience.
Do you believe that genuine sublimation is possible, lifelong? Uh, I had asked that question of the Dalai Lama, and he seemed to say yes, broadly speaking. Of course, he jokes about these things, but in your judgment, do you think do you think it's possible?
I think it's both possible and exceptionally easy to believe that the opposite can happen.
Hmm.
You see, first you have to understand that if you associate desire with guilt,
Right.
why do you do that? In a sense, you mentioned Mahatma Gandhi, one of the greatest men who has lived for centuries now. But he associated the sensual with a sense of guilt as something
Absolutely.
wrong,
Right.
as something that needs to be transcended. And there is indeed a strong s- stream in Indian thought that does so, believes so. All I'm trying to say is that in the Hindu worldview, where karma is one of the four highest purusharths of life, that is not the case. And
Yeah.
so I fully respect those who can transcend physical desire and reach a state of spiritual bliss without it.
Right.
But I accept that I do not hold as wrong those who are committed to the goal of the spiritual path but have not been able to resist it and actually battle with themselves as to whether they can pursue either without the other. You see,
Hmm.
you can be caught or ensnared in a situation where it's not either or.
Right.
Again, I want to stress the fact that we are dealing with human beings. They are not black and white polarities.
Right. How did you avoid being preachy while writing?
Sorry, once again, I missed that break in your voice.
Now, how did you avoid being preachy while writing?
No, because I cannot be preachy, because I do not pass moral judgments.
Hmm.
I really don't. Otherwise, I would not have written books on the Kama Sutra and on Adi Shankaracharya.
Right.
I believe that every human being must be truthful to himself or herself. And no one has the monopoly or even the right to confidently pass judgment on choices which people make in the attempt to be true to themselves. So I cannot write in a preachy style
Hmm.
because I cannot say that this alone is right. That is why one of the great Mahavakyas of Hinduism says, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one. Wise people call it by different names. It's the foundation of our entire evolution.
Right.
So I don't like certitudes which acquire the aroma of gospel truth.
Indeed, indeed. One of the many thrills of being a novelist is that you live vicariously through your characters. Now, which was the character that you enjoyed most living through in this particular novel?
Certainly, Keval, because it is something that I have studied. I identify with in some ways. It's not autobiographical in any way, but uh, uh, you do live vicariously through your characters. A novel or any
Right.
book you write gradually takes you over. Ustad Ali Akbar Khan used to say that in the beginning I played the sarod, but soon enough the sarod begins to play me.
Yes.
So uh, that happens when you write a book. You begin to live with the characters, and for whatever it's worth, you begin to identify with some of their thoughts and emotions, uh, and trying to understand them more deeply.
Can one argue that desires never really leave you till you die? They are always there. It's just a question of managing them or navigating through them.
No, you see, there is something called the time of when any of this happens to you in life. There can be a time in your life through having experienced what is said colloquially, been there, done that you say, now I don't seek anything. That is why in the Hindu worldview, there are the four stages of life.
Right.
You can say, like Kabir said, चाह नहीं, चाहत नहीं, मनवा बेपरवाह, जिसको कुछ नहीं चाहिए, वो है शहंशाह. So
Indeed.
you can be, or to put it in another couplet, if you will allow me. आए ज़ौक़ तलब, desire addicted. आए ज़ौक़ तलब, कश्म कशे दिल से गुजर जा.
Wow.
मंजिल भी अगर आए तो मंजिल से गुजर जा. When
Wow.
you reach that point where you say that now, what will you give me? Or, for instance, I think Mir had this famous line, आगे किसी के क्या करे, दस्ते तमा दराज, this hand of want,
Right.
before whom should I spread it? आगे किसी के क्या करे, दस्ते तमा दराज, ये हाथ सो गया है, सिरहाने धरे धरे,
Ah.
in contentment. So, in other words, there can be points where you've transcended desire, much like Aristotle had. So the legend goes that when Alexander, his student, comes back to him after conquering what he thought was half the world and says to his guru, my teacher, ask me for you unto half my world. And Aristotle is basking in the sun, uh, lying in a tub of hot water, and he says to Alexander, can you just move a little? You're blocking the sun. He's transcended desire. He has transcended conventional wants. It can happen to me.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly valid goal. In fact, that is the premise
Right.
for some kind of enduring bliss. But you have to go through stages of life. And during those stages, neither one is absolutely good nor the other is absolutely bad.
Right.
And you have to struggle with the dilemma of how to synthesize or harmonize both. Some succeed, some don't. Some become hypocrites. Some live in denial. Some are never able to resolve it. Some resort to untruth. So there are
So,
many ways in which people
right.
deal with these dilemmas.
Right, right, right. No, this is remarkable. I'm so glad you wrote it. It was just recently released, so I suppose you're still waiting for the reactions. What's been the initial response from those who have read it?
No, we had, I mean, it's just out. It's available on Amazon, amazon.in.
Right,
And we haven't even had a formal launch in Delhi because typically, being the kind of journalist you're one of the first people I'm giving
oh,
an
how nice
interview
of you.
to in my new novel.
No,
Uh,
thank you.
but in Jaipur, it was very well received. It was a
Yeah,
full, packed audience. And the questions and the number of people who who were curious to read,
right.
given the nature of our discussion. I was actually discussing it with Lady Kishwar Desai,
Okay.
and the discussion was such that people wanted to read it because it's
Yeah.
for you, like you and me, ordinary people who live in this world.
Right. I liked what when you quoted Jacques about the manzil geraye to manzil se guzar raha. It's a remarkable line.
Yes, it is actually because if you reach that stage,
Right.
it can be only as a result of your having being there, done that. If
Right.
it is based on any other presupposition or premise, then it's an initial choice
Right.
which has been done by almost violent exclusion of any other.
Right.
And people do it. And I
Yeah.
don't say that's true. But
Yeah.
if the great wisdom of Sanatan Dharm's worldview, as you move through the stages of life, you come to a point where you say, I don't seek, then you have been blessed. And
Right.
that too is valid.
Yeah. To conclude, that was the point that I was making about Brihaspati not having done it, not missing it, and Keval having done it, trying not to miss it. That's to me, that's the broad
No,
debate.
I'll make a small correction.
Okay.
Guru